Ease. You were never the problem, Emily. Those 6 words came from a man covered in tattoos. Ease. Wearing a leather vest with a death's head on the back. Ease. Speaking to a young woman curled against a concrete wall at 2 in the morning with nothing left to her name. Ease. She didn't believe him, not at first. Because for 24 years, every person who was supposed to love her had told her the exact opposite, and she had learned. The way beaten animals learn that the truth always hurt, and kindness was just cruelty wearing a different coat. She was wrong about that. This is the story of how she found out. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you've been with us before, you already know we don't tell small stories on this channel. We tell the ones that matter, the ones that stay with you. Before we go any further, take a moment right now and hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this one. And when you're done, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Emily's story has already traveled. Now let's begin. The night Emily Dawson's family drove away and left her on the side of a 2-lane Arizona highway. Her mother didn't even look back. Emily stood there and watched the taillights of her father's silver pickup shrink into 2 red dots and then disappear entirely into the flat desert dark. She kept waiting for them to brake, kept waiting for the truck to slow, to turn around, for someone to lean out a window and say they'd made a terrible mistake. She waited until there was nothing left to look at but the highway and the stars and the sound of her own breathing. Then she sat down on her bag and she didn't cry. She had run out of tears about 3 years before this night. Somewhere around the time she stopped arguing back. Emily was 24 years old, 5'4", with pale blonde hair that needed cutting and blue eyes that had a habit of going flat and unreadable when the world got too loud. People who didn't know her sometimes mistook that stillness for stupidity. People who did know her mistook it for acceptance. In reality, it was something closer to armor, the particular kind that forms over a wound when you've stopped expecting it to heal. Her mother's name was Sandra Dawson. Her father was Robert. She had a younger sister named Grace who was 21 and currently studying graphic design at a university in Tempe on a partial scholarship that the family talked about at every dinner like a crown they were all wearing together. Emily had never been to university. She had applied twice. Both times, the family's financial situation had made it impossible, except that wasn't entirely true. And Emily knew it, though she had stopped saying so. The first time, the money that had been set aside for her application fees went toward Grace's new laptop. The second time, Robert had lost his job for 6 weeks. And Sandra had looked at Emily across the kitchen table and said, very quietly, maybe this just isn't your path, honey. In the same tone she might use to tell someone their haircut didn't suit them. Emily had nodded and said okay. That was what she did. She said okay. She absorbed. She adjusted. It had started small. The way these things always do. A comment here. A comparison there. Grace had been the pretty one. The smart one. The ambitious one, not because Grace was particularly extraordinary by any objective standard. But because every family needs a story to tell about itself. And the Dawsons had decided theirs was the story of Grace's potential. And if Grace was the bright one, then Emily, by subtraction, had to be something else. She was the quiet one, the difficult one, the one who didn't apply herself, the one who cost more than she was worth. Her father had said that last part out loud exactly once. During an argument about money when Emily was 19. He'd been drinking, and he apologized the next morning with orange juice and scrambled eggs. And Emily had eaten the breakfast and said it was fine. But some words land in a person's chest like a fishhook. You can't pull them out without tearing something. So you just learn to breathe around them. By the time she was 22, Emily had stopped eating dinner with the family most nights. By 23, she had taken 2 different jobs, one at a dry cleaner's on Route 9 and one answering phones for a medical billing company to pay her share of rent and groceries and utilities, which Robert had begun calculating with a specificity that made it clear she was a tenant rather than a daughter. She did not complain about this. She worked, she saved. She told herself that as soon as she had enough, she would leave and build something of her own. Ease. She had 847 in a savings account and a rough mental sketch of what her life might look like somewhere else. Ease. Then the argument happened. Even now, Emily couldn't fully explain how it escalated so fast. Ease. It had started over something small, a phone call she had made on behalf of Grace to reschedule a dentist appointment. Ease. Something Grace had asked her to do, something Emily had done exactly as asked. Ease. Except the rescheduled appointment conflicted with something Robert needed the car for. Ease. And Robert had come home already in a dark mood, and Sandra had already decided Emily could tell from the moment she heard her mother's voice that tonight was not going to be a night where anyone gave Emily the benefit of the doubt. Ease, you never think, Sandra said. That's the problem. Ease, you never stop to consider anyone else. Grace asked me to. Don't make this about Grace. Ease. Grace didn't screw up the schedule. You did, I was just trying to help. She texted me and asked me to handle it. I can show you. Emily. Her father's voice from the doorway. Flat and final, just stop. Dad, I'm not making this up. She asked me, I said stop. And there it was. That word, that tone, that particular wall that went up in Robert Dawson's face whenever Emily tried to explain herself. She had run into it so many times that she should have turned around and walked away. Instead, she made the mistake of not backing down. Why won't you ever listen to me, she said. Why is it always automatically my fault? The room went very quiet. Sandra set down the dish she was holding. Robert straightened in the doorway. Even Grace, who had been sitting on the couch, pretending to look at her phone, went completely still. Because Sandra, and her voice had a new quality in it now. Something cold and tired and finished. You are always the problem. Emily, you have always been the problem, and I am exhausted. Emily stared at her mother. She waited for someone to say something else, for Robert to walk it back, for Grace to say anything. Silence, fine, Emily said finally. Her voice was very quiet and very steady. Then I'll leave. She half expected them to stop her. They didn't. She was in her room packing a bag when she heard her parents talking in the kitchen in low voices. Not arguing. Just talking. And then she heard Grace say something she couldn't quite make out, and Sandra laugh a short, relieved sound, and that laugh was the thing that finally did it. That was the sound that burned a hole through the last piece of her that still believed she mattered to these people. She packed what she could carry, left the rest, walked out the front door without saying goodbye. And nobody came after her. Her father gave her a ride. That was the part that people always found hardest to believe when she told the story later. Her father drove her in silence, hands at 10 and 2. Country radio at a volume just loud enough to make conversation impossible, and pulled over on the county highway 22 miles outside of Maricopa and said, I think some time apart will be good for both of us. Emily picked up her bag. She got out of the truck, and her father drove away. She walked for about an hour before her feet told her they were done for the night. There was a roadside rest stop about a quarter-mile off the highway, one of those small concrete structures with a roof, and a couple of picnic tables and a water fountain that may or may not work. Emily tested the fountain. It worked. She drank until the hollow feeling behind her eyes eased slightly. Then, she sat down on the bench nearest the far wall and put her bag between her feet and looked at the dark desert around her. She had $83 in cash, her phone with a cracked screen and 31% battery, and the name of a woman from her old job who had once mentioned having a spare room. She did not have the woman's number saved. She had not thought to write it down. She realized, not planned for this at all. Not really. She had imagined leaving 100 times. But in the imagination it was always daylight, and she always had more money, and there was always somewhere obvious to go. The imagination had not included this, the smell of desert night air, and the sound of nothing, and the specific physical weight of being completely, structurally alone. She turned her phone over in her hands and thought about who she could call. There was no one. Not because Emily was a person no one had ever liked, but because the particular architecture of her life at home had made friendships difficult to maintain. When your family treats you like a problem, you begin to treat yourself like one. Ease 2. You stop inviting people close because you don't want them to see what you see. Ease. You cancel plans because something always comes up. Ease. You apologize preemptively and decline offers of help and run yourself so small that eventually people stop offering. Ease. She had done all of this. She recognized it now with a clarity that almost made her laugh. Ease. Okay, she said out loud to no one. Okay, she was going to have to figure something out in the morning. Ease. For now, she needed to not freeze. Ease. Not panic. Ease. And not let the 8 hours of dark between her and sunrise swallow her whole. Ease. She pulled a hoodie from her bag, put it on, and leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. Ease. She did not sleep. About 40 minutes later, she heard the motorcycles. Ease. She heard them before she saw them, a low ease. Rolling thunder from the west, building gradually like a thunderstorm that hadn't broken yet. Ease. Emily opened her eyes. Her first instinct was to pull her bag closer and stay very still. Ease. Because a woman alone at a rest stop in the desert at 2 in the morning hears approaching engine noise, and her nervous system runs a very specific calculation. Ease. Then the headlights swept across the entrance and the bikes pulled in. Ease. And she counted them 1, 2, 3, 4. Ease. 5 big road machines. Ease. Heavy and road-worn, their riders silhouetted in leather and denim against the pale wash of light from the rest stop's single overhead lamp. Ease. They hadn't seen her yet. She was in the far corner. Ease. In shadow. Her hoodie dark. She could hear them, the creak of leather as they dismounted. Ease. Boots on concrete, voices low and easy with each other the way people are when they've been riding together for hours and have settled into a comfortable silence they only break when something's worth saying. Ease. The particular shorthand of people who have trusted each other with their lives on a highway and know it. Ease. She heard one of them say something about stopping in Tucson. Ease. Another one answered. A third man laughed, a short, genuine laugh not performed for anyone. Emily sat very still. Ease. And then the overhead light shifted. Someone must have bumped it. Ease. Or maybe the desert wind caught it, and one of the men turned. Ease. And he saw her. He was not young. He was somewhere in his 50s. Ease. Built like someone who had spent decades doing physical work. Ease. With forearms that told a story all on their own, and a face that was weathered and lined and not unkind. Ease. Though it was a face that had clearly logged some difficult miles. Ease. He had a beard that was mostly gray and dark eyes that were, Ease in this moment, focused entirely on her, with an expression she did not expect. Ease. He was not alarmed. He was not dismissive. He was not the particular flavor of threatening that a woman in her situation fears most. Ease. He was, and this was the word Emily's mind landed on later. Ease, when she was trying to describe it, careful. The way he looked at her was careful. Ease. Like she was something that could break if he moved wrong. Ease. He said nothing to her for a moment. Then he turned back to the other men and said something very quietly. Ease. And 2 of them glanced over, and then they all very deliberately returned to their own business. Ease. One of them found a vending machine around the corner and started feeding it quarters. Ease. Another sat down on a picnic table on the far side of the structure. Ease. The rest spread out, deliberately creating space, deliberately making themselves less than they had been when they all stood together. Ease. The man with the gray beard took a water bottle from the saddlebag on his bike and walked toward her. Ease. He stopped about 10 feet away, not close enough to crowd. Ease. Not far enough to shout. I'm not going to bother you, he said. Ease. I just want to ask, have you got water? It gets cold out here at night and the dehydration sneaks up. Emily looked at him. Ease. Every alarm in her nervous system was running, but there was something about the specificity of the question, not are you okay? Ease. Not do you need help? Not what are you doing out here alone, that disarmed her slightly. Ease. He had asked about something practical, something solvable. Ease. The fountain works, she said. He nodded. Good. He held the water bottle out a little further. Ease. Take this anyway. Store-bought sits better on an empty stomach. Emily didn't move. Ease. My name's Mason, he said. I'm not asking you to trust me. Ease. I'm just giving you water. She reached out and took the bottle. Ease. Thank you, she said. He nodded again and took a step back and sat down on the edge of the picnic table nearest to her. Ease. Not facing her, just sitting, like a man who happened to need to rest his legs, and this was a convenient surface. Ease. Like he had no particular interest in her at all, except that she was a human being in his general vicinity, and that was enough. Emily drank half the water bottle in 2 long swallows. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was until she started. 2 minutes passed, maybe 3. Just the sound of the desert and the distant voices of the other men. He's comfortable and low. Then Mason said, without looking at her, how long you been sitting here? A while, Emily said. Somebody dropped you off or you walked. Somebody dropped me off. Pause. You got somewhere to be by morning? Emily opened her mouth and then closed it. She looked at her hands. I'm working on it, she said finally. Mason turned his head then and looked at her directly. Not intrusive, not pitying, just seeing her the way people rarely do. Okay, he said. You need anything before we roll out? You just say it. Nobody here is going to mess with you. How do you know that? Emily asked. The question came out before she could stop it, sharper than she intended. Mason's expression didn't change. Because I said so, he told her simply, and somehow that was the most reasonable thing anyone had said to her in longer than she could remember. She almost smiled. Didn't quite make it. Who are you? She asked. Bikers, he said. Nothing glamorous. Just men who've been on the road a long time and know what it means to need a minute. He pulled his vest slightly to the side. Just enough that she could see the patch on the front. 3 words. She read them. She had heard of the Hells Angels the way most people had in the abstract, as a concept, as a kind of shorthand for danger and lawlessness and things to be afraid of. She had not expected this. Not this particular man sitting on a picnic table in the Arizona desert, handing her a water bottle and calling the space around her safe. She said nothing. He let the vest fall back into place. I know what you've heard, he said. Not defensive. Just acknowledging it. You don't have to have an opinion tonight. You don't have to have anything tonight. Emily looked at the water bottle in her hands. My family left me here, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. It just came out, flat and factual, like something her body needed to say before her mind could catch up. Mason was quiet for a moment. Your own family? He said. My own family. Another silence. Not uncomfortable. Not pressing, just held the way you hold something fragile. How old are you? He asked. 24. They give a reason? She thought about it. About Sandra's voice, tired and cold. About Robert's hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. About Grace laughing in the kitchen at the sound of a door closing. They think I'm the problem, she said. They've thought that for a long time. Mason looked at her for a long moment. And then he said it, the 6 words that she would spend the next year turning over in her hands like a stone that keeps surprising you with its weight. You were never the problem, Emily. She froze. How do you know my name? She whispered. Mason pointed. She looked down. There was an old name tag clipped to the inside of her hoodie pocket from the medical billing job. The kind they give you on your first day, and you never bother removing, and it said Emily in block letters so worn they were almost invisible. Lucky guess on the rest, he said quietly. Emily stared at him. And for the first time in she couldn't remember how long, she felt something in her chest move, not break, not hurt, but move. Like something frozen had remembered how to shift. Why would you say that? She asked. You don't know anything about me. I know you've been sitting alone in the dark for hours, Mason said. And you're not crying. And I know that the people who have the most reason to cry are usually the ones who've cried all the way through to the other side and come out quiet. And I know that quiet doesn't mean worthless, even if somebody told you it did. She didn't answer. She couldn't. You don't have to talk about it, he said. You don't have to do anything, but I'm going to ask my guys to make sure you're not alone out here. Because that's what we do. And if you want to tell me what happened, I'll listen. And if you don't, I'll sit here until you're ready to figure out your next move. Emily looked at this stranger, this weathered, leather-vested, gray-beard stranger and tried to find the angle. Tried to locate the hidden cost, the price tag concealed in the kindness. Because there was always one. That was what she knew. She couldn't find it. Why? She asked. Just the one word. Mason reached up and rubbed the back of his neck. Had a daughter once, he said. Ease. She was about your age when she stopped calling. I spent a long time afterward wondering if I'd done something, or said something, or let something slide I shouldn't have. Ease. Still don't have all the answers. He looked at the highway. Ease. But I know what it looks like when someone's been told they don't count. Ease. And I know it's a lie. Every single time. Emily looked down at the water bottle. Ease. She breathed. She said, my sister's the one they care about. Ease, Grace. She stopped, started again. I've been covering for her for years. Ease. Taking the blame when she messes up. Staying quiet when she gets the opportunities. Ease. And 2 hours ago, my mother told me I've always been the problem. And my father drove me 22 miles out of town and left me on the highway without saying goodbye. Just like that, Mason said. Ease. Just like that. He nodded slowly. The kind of nod that isn't agreement, but is something deeper acknowledgement. Ease recognition. I hear you. I believe you. You believe her, he asked. Ease. Your mother. That you're the problem? Emily was quiet for a long time. Ease. I don't know, she finally said. I think I used to not believe it. Ease. And then I started to. And now I don't know what I believe anymore. That's honest, Mason said. Ease, it's exhausting, Emily said. He almost smiled. Yeah. Ease, it usually is. Behind them, one of the other men called out, checking in. Ease, asking if everything was good. Mason raised a hand and made a small gesture without turning around. Ease. And the voice went quiet again. We're making a stop in a town called Ridgeway, Mason said. Ease. About 30 miles east. There's a woman there, runs it's not a shelter. Ease. Exactly. More of a way station. She knows us. She knows what we do. Ease. She's got rooms. She's got food. And she doesn't ask for anything from the people who come through. Ease. Not their story, not their plan, not their gratitude. He looked at Emily. Ease. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you the option exists. Emily thought about the $83 in her pocket. Ease. The dead-end phone number she couldn't remember. The morning that was still hours away. Ease. She thought about her mother's laugh from behind a closed kitchen door. Ease. Okay, she said. Mason stood up from the picnic table. Ease. Okay, agreed. Ease. And the word carried no triumph in it. Ease. No, I told you, so no relief. Just okay. Like it was the most natural thing in the world for a person to decide to take the next step when somebody showed them where it was. Ease. He walked back toward his bike and said something to the other men. Ease. And she watched them react, not with surprise, not with wariness, ease, but with the particular efficiency of people who have done a version of this before. Ease. One of them, younger, with dark hair and a sleeve of tattoos, came over and introduced himself as Dutch and said he had a spare helmet she could use if she was riding with Mason. Ease, you ever been on a motorcycle? Dutch asked. No, Emily said. Ease. Then hold on and don't lean against the turns. The bike knows what it's doing. Ease. Just let it. She almost laughed at that. She put on the helmet. Ease. And as the rest stopped, faded behind them, and the desert highway opened up in front, ease. Emily Dawson held onto the back of Mason Callahan's jacket and felt, ease, for the first time in a very long time, that she was moving towards something instead of away from everything. Ease. She didn't know yet what that something was. She didn't know what waited for her in Ridgeway. Ease. She didn't know what Mason's story really was, or what the community ahead would look like up close. Ease. Or whether trust was something she was even capable of rebuilding. Ease. She didn't know that her family wasn't done with her, that Sandra had already called her twice on a phone with 31% battery and no signal out on the highway. Ease. And that those calls weren't what they looked like. Ease. She didn't know that the hardest part hadn't started yet. Ease. But for right now, on this dark road with the stars overhead and the sound of 5 motorcycles keeping easy pace around her, ease. Emily Dawson was not sitting alone in the dark, and that was enough. Ease. That was everything. The town of Ridgeway announced itself with a water tower and a blinking yellow caution light at a 4-way intersection. Ease. And Emily thought, as they pulled off the highway and slowed through quiet streets at nearly 3 in the morning, ease, that she had never in her life arrived somewhere and felt less certain about what she was doing. Ease. Her hands were still locked around the back of Mason's jacket. Ease. She loosened them finger by finger, like someone ungripping a ledge. Ease. Dutch had been right about the motorcycle. The bike knew what it was doing. Ease. She hadn't known what to do with her body at first. Every instinct had told her to brace against the turns, to correct, to resist. And Mason had felt it and said over his shoulder, "Ease," just loudly enough to be heard over the engine. "Ease, stop fighting it." Ease. And she had. Ease. And then it had been fine. It had been more than fine. Ease. There had been a moment on the open highway, just one. Ease. When the air was warm and the stars were enormous, and the road felt endless in the right way rather than the frightening way. Ease. And Emily had felt something in her chest, ease open by a fraction of an inch. Ease. That fraction had closed again by the time they stopped. Ease. Mason killed the engine in front of a wide single-story house with a covered porch. Ease. A light was already on inside. Not the kind of light that had just been switched on, the kind that had been on all night. Ease. The particular steady glow of a place that doesn't fully close. Ease. The door opened before any of them knocked. The woman in the doorway was somewhere in her 60s. Ease. Short and broad-shouldered with silver hair cut close to her head and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead like a second set of eyes. Ease. She was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans and looked as though she had been awake and expected this exactly, not this situation specifically. Ease. But the general category of it. People arriving at her door in the dark with nowhere else to be. "Ease, Mason," she said. "No surprise, Ruth," he said. "Sorry for the hour." "I'm not," she said. "Ease." And her eyes had already moved past him to Emily, and they were measuring not unkindly. Ease. Not in the way Emily was used to being measured, which was always in the currency of what she lacked, but practically. Ease. The way a person looks at a situation to understand what it needs. Ease. "Come in," Ruth said. Ease. And stepped back. Ease. And Emily. Ease. After the smallest hesitation, walked through the door. Ease. Ruth's name was Ruth Alvarez. Ease. And she had been running what she called an open table out of her house for 11 years. Ease. Since her husband died and left her with a house that was too big for one person and a personality that was constitutionally unsuited to quiet. Ease. She had no official affiliation, no nonprofit status. Ease. No intake forms. What she had was a spare room with a clean bed. Ease. A kitchen that was always stocked, and an absolute zero-tolerance policy for anyone making her guests feel like they owed something for being there. Ease. She explained none of this to Emily that first night. Ease. She just handed her a glass of water and a plate of leftover cornbread and said, "Ease. Bathroom's the second door on the left. There's a lock that works. Ease. Room at the end of the hall is yours as long as you need it. Ease. We can talk in the morning, or we don't have to talk at all." Emily ate the cornbread standing in the kitchen because she didn't trust her legs to hold her through a more formal arrangement. Ease. It was the best thing she had tasted in months. Ease. She would later realize this was not because Ruth was an exceptional cook. The cornbread was perfectly ordinary, but because food tastes different when nobody is going to make you feel guilty for eating it. Ease. Ruth leaned against the counter and drank coffee and didn't look at Emily the way people looked at charity cases. She just drank her coffee. "Where were you before this?" Ruth asked. Ease. After a while. "A rest stop," Emily said. "Before the rest stop, my parents' house." Emily paused. "Ease, my father's house, technically." "I never." She stopped. "Ease, I couldn't afford the area on my own." Ruth nodded. "Ease, what kind of work?" "I had 2 jobs, medical billing, Ease, and a dry cleaner's." The billing job was remote. She thought about her laptop, Ease, which was in her bag. "I might still have that one." "Good," Ruth said simply. Ease, as though Emily had said something useful rather than something painful. Ease. "Sleep first. Everything else is smaller after sleep." Emily carried her bag to the room at the end of the hall. Ease. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands and waited for the catch. Ease. Waited for Ruth to come back and explain the rules. Ease, the price, the expectation. Waited for the other shoe. Ease. It didn't come. She lay down without taking off her shoes and was asleep in 4 minutes. Ease. She slept 9 hours. When she woke up, Ease. She lay still for a long moment because the ceiling was unfamiliar, and her body registered that fact before her mind did. Ease. And for one tilted second, she felt pure animal panic. Where am I? Ease. Where am I? And then it all came back. And the panic didn't disappear exactly, but it reorganized itself into something she could function inside of. Ease. She found Mason at Ruth's kitchen table with a mug of coffee and a county map spread in front of him, And one of the other men, she would later learn his name was Carl. He's a 58-year-old retired highway patrolman from Flagstaff who had, by some logic that made complete sense to everyone in the group, joined the Hells Angels after leaving law enforcement rather than before. Carl was drawing a line on the map with a pen and saying something about road conditions on I-10. They both looked up when she came in. Neither of them made the look mean anything. Coffee's on the counter, Mason said. Ruth set the market. She'll be back in an hour. Emily poured herself coffee and stood at the counter and drank it and listened to the two men talk about roads. It was oddly settling. The conversation made no demands on her. She was just a person in a kitchen drinking coffee. And no one was keeping score. After a few minutes, Carl folded the map and said he was going to check on the bikes. Left it at that and walked out. Mason turned his mug in his hands. How'd you sleep? He asked. Better than I should have, Emily said. That's not a thing, he said. You sleep how you sleep. She looked into her coffee. What is this place? She asked. What's the arrangement? Does Ruth get paid by somebody? Ruth has a pension from her husband's insurance and she owns the house outright, Mason said. The guys contribute when we're in the area. She refuses anything that feels like payment. So we call it groceries, and she accepts that. He took a drink of coffee. There's no arrangement. Some things just are what they look like. Emily was quiet. Then she said, I'm not used to that. I know, he said. Not condescending. Not gentle in the performed way that people are gentle at you when they want you to feel handled. Just acknowledging I know, the way you'd say it to a person who just told you something true. Can I ask you something? Emily said. Sure, last night you said you had a daughter. He's my age. Mason went still for just a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. What happened to her? Emily asked. He was quiet long enough that she thought she'd overstepped. And she was drawing breath to apologize when he said, She left. She was 22. There had been a falling out. About some choices I'd made when she was growing up. Choices about being on the road instead of being home. She told me I had never really been there even when I was standing right in front of her. And she wasn't wrong. He turned the mug again. I've tried to reach out a few times. She's not ready. Maybe she never will be. I don't know. I'm sorry, Emily said. Don't be. You didn't do anything. He looked at her. I tell you that not to make you feel sorry for me. I tell you because I want you to understand that I'm not doing this out of guilt and I'm not projecting something onto you. I know the difference between a daughter and a stranger. You're a stranger, but a stranger doesn't stop being a human being just because you don't share their history. Emily looked at him. That's a very specific thing to say, she said. I've had time to think it through, he said. She almost smiled again. This time it made it part way up. Ruth came back from the market with 2 bags of groceries and the information that she had run into her neighbor Delia, who wanted to know whose motorcycles were in the driveway. And Ruth had told her they were her nephews from Tucson, and Delia had believed this completely, which Ruth seemed to find quietly hilarious. She unpacked groceries while Emily sat at the table and Mason went outside. And at some point, Ruth handed Emily a carton of eggs without preamble and said, Can you? Emily said. Good. I hate doing it. My wrists. Emily scrambled eggs. She made enough for everyone. Dutch came in from outside smelling like engine oil and said something to Ruth in Spanish, and Ruth laughed and answered in Spanish, and Emily realized she understood maybe a third of it, which was more Spanish than she'd thought she knew. She put eggs on plates. People ate. Carl said they were good eggs. Dutch stole an extra piece of toast from the counter, and Ruth smacked his hand on the way by without looking. Emily sat in the middle of all of this and felt with a strange, lurching disorientation, like she was watching a family eat breakfast. Not her family. Nothing like her family. But the feeling it gave her, the background hum of it. People moving through a shared space and not hurting each other. Just existing. Just eating. Just talking about nothing. She had not felt that feeling in so long that her chest didn't know what to do with it. Her eyes stung. She looked at her plate. She did not cry. By the afternoon, Emily had plugged in her laptop and logged into the VPN for her billing job and found 8 emails waiting and 42 claims in the queue. Ease. She processed claims for 2.5 hours at Ruth's kitchen table. Ease. And the familiar mechanical rhythm of it, find the code. Ease. Check the date. Submit the claim was more grounding than she would have expected. Ease. Something to do. Something she was good at. Something that paid. Ease. Ruth glanced at her screen once as she passed and said, "Ease medical billing," and Emily said yes. And Ruth said, "Lord, he's the worst industry alive." Ease. And kept walking. Ease. And Emily laughed, a real one. Ease. Short and surprised for the first time in what felt like weeks. Ease. Mason appeared in the doorway around 4 and said the group was going to ride out in the morning and asked if Emily had any thoughts about next steps. Ease. She had been thinking about this. "There's a city 2 hours from here," she said. Ease. I looked it up. There are 2 medical billing companies with job postings. Ease. I could do an in-person application. I just need... She stopped. Ease. I need a few days to get a little more stable before I try to sort out housing. Ruth won't push you out, Mason said. Ease. I know, but I don't want to take advantage. He studied her. Ease. There's a difference between taking advantage and accepting help. I know that, Emily said. Ease. And then after a pause, I'm working on knowing that. He nodded. Ease. Fair. He pulled out a card from his shirt pocket and put it on the table next to her laptop. Ease. It was plain white, just a name, Mason Callahan, and a phone number. Ease. That's my cell, he said. If something comes up that you can't handle on your own, Ease, you call it. Day or night. She looked at the card. Ease. Why? She asked, and it came out the same way it had the night before. Not ungrateful. Ease. Just genuinely unable to locate the logic of it. Because you asked me last night why I do this, he said. Ease. And I didn't give you a full answer. Here's the full answer. Ease. I've spent a lot of years watching people go through hell because nobody thought they were worth the effort of a single reach. Ease. A hand on the shoulder, a glass of water, a room with a lock on the door. He picked up his coffee. Ease. Which he'd been carrying since before she noticed him in the doorway. Ease. I'm not a hero. I don't want to be thanked. I just know that the distance between someone making it through and not making it through is almost always a very small number of moments. Ease. And sometimes I'm standing in the right place to be one of those moments. Ease. That's it. Emily picked up the card. She looked at it for a moment. Ease, my mother used to say, she said slowly, that I expected too much from people. Ease. That I was always looking for something they couldn't give. Mason let a beat of silence pass. Ease. What do you think about that now? He asked. She tucked the card into her hoodie pocket. Ease, next to the name tag. I think, she said, that she was telling me not to expect what she specifically couldn't give. Ease. And that maybe that's not the same thing as a universal truth. Mason's expression didn't change. Ease. But something in it settled, the way a room settles when the right word is finally said. Ease. That's a long way from where you were last night, he said. Ease. I'm a fast processor, she said. It's the only thing they never managed to take. That evening, Ruth made a big pot of chili, and 9 people ate at Mason and his 4 men. Ease. Emily, Ruth. Ease. And 2 other women who appeared at the back door around 6. Ease. Both of them regulars. Both of them with the specific ease of people who had been coming to this kitchen long enough that they knew where Ruth kept the bowls without asking. Ease. One of the women, a 40-year-old named Carla, who wore her hair in a braid down her back and spoke with a New Mexico accent thick as red clay, Ease, sat next to Emily and asked what had brought her here without making the question feel like an interrogation. Ease, Emily told her a shortened version, her family. The highway. Ease, Mason. Carla listened and said, Mason found me too. Ease. 4 years ago. She picked up her spoon. I was outside a Walmart in Benson with my kids in the car and no gas and 40 cents in my account. Ease. I didn't even know I needed help. I thought I was just problem solving. Ease. You know, just figuring it out the way you do. What did he say to you? Emily asked. Ease. Carla smiled. He said, get this, he said. You look like someone who's been solving problems so long you forgot there's supposed to be a reason they stop. She shook her head. Ease. I cried for 20 minutes in the parking lot of a Walmart. Ease. The man stood there the whole time and did not say a single other word. Ease just waited. Like time wasn't a thing. Emily looked across the table at Mason. who was in an argument with Dutch about the best stretch of Route 60, and clearly not winning it. He's strange, Emily said quietly. He really is, Carla agreed. But the good kind. The kind that takes you a while to understand. Emily ate her chili and thought about that. The next morning, Mason and his men got ready to ride out at 6:30. Emily was already awake. She'd woken at 5 and hadn't gone back to sleep. Too much turning over in her head. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop and a second coffee when Mason came through to fill his travel mug. You'll be all right, he said. It wasn't a question. You don't know that, she said. No, he agreed. But I think it. That's not nothing. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Can I ask you something? You keep asking me that before you ask, he said. Just ask. Why me? She said. Out of all the people at all the rest stops, why did you stop? Mason poured his coffee and put the lid on and turned around and leaned against the counter and said nothing for a moment. I'm not going to give you a big philosophical answer, he said. I stopped because you were there and you were alone, and that was enough. That is always enough. You don't have to earn intervention. You just have to need it and be in front of someone who notices. Emily's jaw tightened. She was not going to cry in Ruth's kitchen at 6 in the morning in front of a biker she'd met 48 hours ago. She was absolutely not going to do that. She did it anyway. Not dramatically, just 2 tears she couldn't prevent. Moving fast, and then she pressed the back of her hand against her face and breathed through her nose, and when she lowered her hand, she was done. Mason handed her a paper towel from the counter roll. Thank you, she said, voice level. Don't mention it, he said. Dutch's voice came from outside time to go. Apparently, there was weather west of Tucson and they needed to beat it. Mason pushed off the counter and picked up his travel mug. At the kitchen doorway, he stopped and turned back. One more thing, he said. Emily looked up. Your sister, he said. Grace. I don't know her. Maybe she's exactly what she sounds like. But people who get carried by someone else for a long time, sometimes they don't even know that's what's happening. Sometimes the person carrying them disappears and it cracks something open. He held her gaze. I'm not making excuses for her. I'm just saying the story might not be finished. Then he walked out. And a minute later she heard the engines, and then she didn't. She stayed at Ruth's for 9 days. In those 9 days, she processed 417 billing claims. Rebuilt her savings by $600, took a bus into the city and had 2 job interviews. And was offered a position at the larger of the 2 companies in office. Benefits after 90 days, 42 hours a week, entry level, but with a clear ladder. She cried on the bus home. The man sitting across from her pretended not to notice, which she appreciated. She told Ruth over dinner that night. Ruth put a hand on her arm and said, good. About time something moved. On her 5th day, she'd called Mason to tell him about the first interview. He'd answered on the second ring and listened to the whole thing, and at the end said, you walked in there and sold yourself as the person you actually are. What did that feel like? Terrifying, she said. And then not. Hold on to that knot, he said. On her 7th day, she found housing a room in a shared house with 3 other women. 2 of whom were nurses who worked odd hours, and 1 of whom was a graduate student in environmental science who kept very specific types of tea organized in a way that Emily found comforting without being able to explain why. On her 9th day, she packed her bag again. Ruth stood on the porch and watched her and didn't do the thing where you say you don't have to go as a performance of keeping someone when you both know it's time. You have what you need, Ruth asked. I think so, Emily said. That's not 100% yes, Ruth said. No, Emily said. But it's enough to start. Ruth nodded. You come back through if you're ever in Ridgeway. Door's not locked. Emily shouldered her bag. Why do you do it? She asked. Because she had been wanting to ask for 9 days, and this was the last chance she'd get. Ruth looked at her over the rim of her reading glasses, which were back in their usual position on her forehead. Because I had a person once, she said, who kept the door open when mine was locked. And the only way I ever figured out to pay that back was to keep mine open for someone else, she shrugged. Simple as that. That's all it is. It's just a chain. Ease. You'll be part of it someday if you're not already. Emily stood on the porch steps and thought about that. Ease. She thought about a rest stop in the dark, about a water bottle extended across 10 feet of concrete. Ease. About the specific quality of being seen by someone who has no reason to see you. Ease. Okay, she said. And she meant it the way Mason had meant it, not as certainty. Ease, but as direction. Not as arrival, but as motion. She took the first step off the porch. She did not look back, but she didn't need to. She already knew the door was still open behind her. What she didn't know, what she was about to find out in the worst possible way, was that her family had found her address. Sandra had been calling Ruth's landline number for 4 days. Ruth hadn't told Emily. She'd been waiting for Emily to be ready. Emily was not ready for what was coming. But then again, nobody ever is. Sandra Dawson did not call to apologize. Emily figured that out in the first 30 seconds of the conversation. Standing on the sidewalk outside the shared house with her bag, still over her shoulder. Her phone pressed to her ear, and the particular clarity that comes when your body understands something before your mind has caught up to it. Her mother's voice was doing the thing it did, warm at the surface. With something harder underneath, like a lake in February that looks like it might be thawing and isn't. Sweetheart, Sandra said. We've been so worried. Emily said nothing. Your father has been, you know how he is. He's been sick with it. We didn't know where you were. You drove me there, Emily said. You knew exactly where I was. A pause. Then Sandra's voice shifted slightly, not dropping the warmth. Just adjusting it, recalibrating. You're angry, I understand that. But I need you to listen to me, because something has happened and it's serious, and I need you to come home. Emily's grip on the phone tightened. What happened? It's Grace, Sandra said. And despite everything, despite the highway, despite the taillight, despite the laugh from the kitchen, Emily felt her stomach drop. Because whatever had been done to her by this family, she had spent 24 years being Grace's backup system, and that reflex did not switch off in 9 days. What happened to Grace? She said. She had to withdraw from university, Sandra said. Something happened with her scholarship. There was an incident. She's fine. She's physically fine, but she needs support right now, and we need to be together as a family. This is not the time to be carrying grudges. Emily stood very still on the sidewalk. Tell me exactly what happened, she said. I'd rather do this in person. Tell me now or I'm hanging up. Sandra made a sound half sigh. Half calculation. Then she said, Grace was caught falsifying lab reports for a professor. She's been removed from the program. She could face academic misconduct charges. We're working with a lawyer, but it's a serious situation and she's very fragile and you need me, Emily said. We need our family together. Emily took the phone away from her ear. She stared at the middle distance for approximately 4 seconds. Running the math. Grace had been caught cheating. The family was in crisis management mode. And the first call they made was to the daughter they had left on a highway 3 weeks ago. She already knew why. She had always been the one who made things smooth. The one who absorbed the friction. The one who, when Grace stumbled, quietly built a ramp so no one had to see the fall. They needed that function back. Not her. The function. She put the phone back to her ear. I'm not coming home, she said. The silence on the other end had a texture to it. Emily, I'm not coming home, she said again. And I'm not fixing this. I have a job. I have a place to live. I'm building something, and I'm not going to stop building it because Grace needs someone to blame her problems on. Nobody is blaming you for anything. You always blame me for something, Emily said. And her voice was completely level, which surprised her. She had expected rage. Instead, she felt something quieter. Something that had been sitting under the rage for a very long time. Waiting for the noise to clear. Every time there's a problem in that house, you find a way to make it circle back to me. I'm done being the landing pad. That is not... Sandra's voice rose slightly. That is not fair and you know it. After everything we've done for you, what did you do for me? Emily said. Silence, no. I'm asking genuinely. Tell me one specific thing you did for me in the last 5 years. Not for Grace, for me. The silence stretched. We gave you a place to live, Sandra said finally. I paid rent, Emily said. I paid more than rent. Please. I paid utilities and groceries and half the internet bill, and I did it on 2 jobs while you told me I wasn't applying myself, she breathed. Please, don't call me about Grace. Don't call me to come home. Please. If you want to have a real conversation, not a crisis conversation, please. Not a what can Emily fix conversation, a real one. I might be able to do that someday. Please. But not now. She hung up, she stood on the sidewalk and breathed for 30 seconds. Please. Then she called Mason. He answered on the second ring. Please. Her name is Grace, Emily said. My sister. She got caught cheating at university, and my mother just called me to come home and fix it. Please. And I said no, she paused. I've never said no before. She heard Mason exhale slowly. Please. How does it feel? He asked. Like I pushed something off a cliff and I can't tell yet if it was the right thing to push. That feeling's going to stay a while, he said. Please. How long? Until it doesn't, he said. That's the honest answer. But Emily, you said no. That's real. That's a line. Please. The first one is always the hardest because you don't know yet if the floor is still there when you land on the other side. Is it? She asked. Please. You're still standing, he said. So yes. She looked down at her feet on the sidewalk. Please. He was right. She was still standing. Okay, she said. Please. Okay, he said back. Call me tonight if you need to. She put the phone in her pocket and went inside. Please. 3 days later, her father called. Please. Not Sandra Robert, which was unusual enough that Emily almost didn't answer. Please. Robert Dawson communicated primarily through the gravitational field of his disapproval rather than through direct conversation. Please. And a call from his cell in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon was outside all established patterns. Please, Dad, she said. Emily. His voice was tired. Not the performed exhaustion her mother used as a tool. He's actually tired, the kind that comes from not sleeping. He's from carrying something that won't put itself down. She had heard that voice from him exactly twice before in her life, once when his mother died. And once when he lost his job. I need to say something to you. She waited. I handled things wrong, he said. What I did on the highway. I've been going over it, and I don't have a good explanation for it. I want you to know I know it was wrong. Emily sat down at the kitchen table in the shared house. Both nurses were at work. The environmental science student was in class. The house was quiet. Okay, she said carefully. That's not an apology, Robert said. I know it's not. I'm not asking you to. He stopped. Start it again. Your mother told me what you said. That you've never heard a specific thing we did for you. And I stayed up most of last night trying to think of one that wasn't another stop. I couldn't. Emily's throat tightened. Dad, she said. Don't, he said quickly. Don't make this easier. I don't deserve that. She closed her mouth. I don't know how this happened, Robert said. I don't know when you stopped being someone I was taking care of and became someone I was just managing. And I don't know what to do with that except tell you I know it. I'm not asking you to come back. Your mother wants you back and I want you to be okay. Those are different things. Emily pressed her free hand flat against the table. Is that the whole call, she asked. No, he said. There's something about Grace. Emily said nothing. She's not doing well, Robert said. Not the school thing, she's dealing with that. She has to deal with that herself. But she asked me something last week. She asked me if I thought you'd ever been treated fairly. By us. A long pause. I didn't answer her. I couldn't get the words out. But the question, the fact that she was asking it, I thought you should know. Emily sat with that for a moment. With the image of Grace, 21 years old, sitting across from their father and asking that question. Not defending herself, not redirecting, asking about Emily. She didn't know what to do with it. Thank you for calling, she said finally. That's all I get, huh, Robert said. Just measuring the distance. For now, Emily said. Yes, he didn't push. He said okay, and he said take care, and he ended the call. And Emily sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall and thought about the fact that her family was, apparently, not a static thing, that it had cracks she hadn't known about. That someone on the inside was asking the right question. Finally, Even if 10 years late, it didn't fix anything. But it was something. She called Mason and told him about the call. What do you think Grace meant by it? He asked. I don't know, Emily said. Maybe she finally saw something. Maybe she's looking for a way to shift blame again. I can't tell yet. What does your gut say? Emily thought. That she's scared, she said. She built her whole identity on being the good one. The chosen one. And now she got caught doing something wrong. And the architecture of that identity is cracking. And she's standing in the wreckage going, wait, if I'm not the good one, then what was all of that for? And if I'm not the good one, then what does that make Emily? A long pause from Mason. You should go into counseling, he said. Emily laughed. Surprised again. I'm not going into counseling. I'm serious. That was clinical level insight about a person who has given you every reason to just be angry at her. I'm still angry at her, Emily said. You can be both, he said. That's the whole thing. Anger and understanding aren't opposites. She hadn't thought of it that way. She filed it. The job started on a Monday. It was nothing dramatic. An office building, a badge. A desk. A woman named Patricia, who was going to be her supervisor and who shook her hand briskly and showed her around with the efficiency of someone who had onboarded a lot of people and had a system. Emily paid attention to the system. She was good at system. Systems didn't have bad days that you had to absorb. By the end of the first week, Patricia had moved her to a more complex claims queue. By the end of the second, she had the second highest clearance rate in the team. She called Mason to tell him on a Friday evening, walking home from the bus stop. Of course you do, he said. Don't do that, she said. Don't do what? Act like it was inevitable. It wasn't inevitable. You could have believed them, he said. You could have sat in that rest stop and accepted the verdict. You didn't. I sat in the rest stop for 5 hours, she said. And then you took the water bottle, he said. That's the whole story. The 5 hours don't define it. The water bottle does. She walked half a block in silence. The evening was cooling off, and the neighborhood smelled like someone's dinner coming through a screen door. Something with garlic. And it was so ordinarily, accidentally beautiful that she had to stop for a second. I want to do something, she said. For other people. Like what you do. Like what Ruth does. I don't know what it looks like yet. You've been out 9 days, Mason said. 3 weeks, she corrected. 3 weeks, he said. You're still standing. The helping part comes later. How much later? When it comes, he said. You'll know, she started walking again. You're frustratingly wise, she said. I've been called worse, he said. It was 2 blocks from the shared house when her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. She didn't. Is this Emily Dawson? A woman's voice. Official. The kind that belongs to a person who makes a lot of calls and does not waste words on them. Yes, Emily said slowly. My name is Karen Holt. I'm an investigator with the Arizona Board of Social Services. We've received a report from a third party regarding a family situation, and your name has come up as a potential witness in an ongoing inquiry. I was hoping to schedule a time to speak with you. Emily stopped walking. What kind of inquiry? She said. I'm not able to give specific details over the phone, Karen said. But I can tell you it involves allegations of psychological coercion and financial manipulation within a family unit over an extended period. The third party who filed the report indicated you have direct experience relevant to the case. Emily's heart was doing something she couldn't fully name. Not panic. Something closer to the feeling of a door opening that you thought was locked forever. Who filed the report? Emily asked. A pause. I'm not able to disclose that at this stage, Karen said. But I can tell you the filing was voluntary and that the individual who filed it did so on your behalf. Emily stood on the sidewalk in the cooling evening and tried to think of who it could be. Not Mason, he didn't know enough of the specifics. Not Ruth. Not Carla. And then it hit her. It was Grace. Her 21-year-old sister, standing in the wreckage of her own choices, had looked at the architecture of their family with fresh eyes and filed a report on behalf of the sister she had watched get swallowed for 20 years. Emily's legs felt suddenly uncertain. She found a low wall nearby and sat on it. Are you still there? Karen asked. Yes, Emily said. I'm here. I'll meet with you. Her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. Tell me when and where. She called Mason from the wall. He picked up immediately. She had not been off the phone with him long. That was fast, he said. What? It was a social services investigator, Emily said. Someone filed a report about my family, about what was done to me. She pressed her free hand against her sternum. I think it was Grace. Silence from Mason. Very quietly. Well, yeah, she said. I don't know, she said. He's big. Everything feels very big right now. That's appropriate, he said. This is a big thing. If it's Grace, Emily stopped. If she did this, she put herself in the middle of it. She told a government investigator that something was wrong in our house. It's going to make things complicated, Mason said. Very. And you're going to have to decide how much of the truth you're willing to say out loud, he said. In an official setting. With someone writing it down, Emily breathed. I know. Are you ready for that? She thought about what ready meant. She thought about Sandra's voice on the phone, warm at the surface. About Robert at 10 and 2 on a highway. About a kitchen door closing on a lap. About years of saying okay, 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 until the word lost all its weight. No, she said. But I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah, Mason said. I know. She called Ruth that night, told her everything. Ruth listened without interrupting, which was its own form of extraordinary. When Emily finished, Ruth said, you need someone with you when you meet with the investigator. Not a lawyer necessarily, just a person. I was going to ask Carla, Emily said. Carla's good, Ruth said. She knows how to stay calm in a room that's trying to destabilize her. Take her. Ruth, Emily said. Did you know, when my mother was calling your landline, did you know she'd been calling? A pause. Yes, Ruth said simply. I didn't tell you because you weren't ready. You were still finding the floor. Another pause. Are you angry at me? Emily thought about it honestly. No, she said. You were right. I wasn't ready. You're ready now, Ruth said. Emily sat on the edge of her bed in the room she shared with no one. In a house full of people who had nothing to do with her family's damage. And thought about what ready actually looked like from the inside. It didn't feel like confidence. It didn't feel like certainty. It felt like standing at the edge of something and deciding that the not knowing was no longer a reason to stay back. She had a meeting in 4 days. She had a job that respected her. She had a phone with Mason's number in it and a card with his name on it, and the specific knowledge that someone who had no reason to believe in her had chosen to do it anyway. She had the words Grace had asked their father in a quiet room. Do you think she was ever treated fairly? She had 9 days in Ruth's kitchen and scrambled eggs and the sound of people not hurting each other. She had all of this. And she had herself. And tomorrow morning she had to go back to work and process claims and be ordinary. And she was going to do all of it. What she didn't know yet was what the investigator would find. What she didn't know was what Grace would say when they finally spoke. What she didn't know was that Sandra Dawson, upon learning that a social services report had been filed, had retained a lawyer and begun building a counter-narrative, and that the counter-narrative centered entirely on Emily. That Emily was unstable, that Emily had a history of distorted perception. That the real problem in this family had always been Emily. Some words work like fishhooks. You can't pull them out without tearing something. Sandra had spent 20 years sharpening them, and she was not done. Karen Holt conducted the interview in a small conference room at a county social services office. And the first thing Emily noticed when she walked in was that Karen was younger than she'd sounded on the phone. Mid-30s. Dark hair pulled back. A yellow legal pad and 2 pens on the table in front of her, one black, one red, and the particular stillness of someone who had learned to make herself neutral as a professional skill. Carla sat beside Emily. She had driven 2 hours from Ridgeway without being asked twice. Arriving at Emily's door that morning with coffee and the specific calm of a woman who had been in hard rooms before and knew how to keep her breathing steady. Thank you for coming, Karen said. Thank you for the call, Emily said. Please. Karen looked at her notepad. I want to be clear about the scope of this interview before we begin. Please. This is not a formal deposition. Nothing you say here creates legal obligation. Please. We're gathering information to determine whether a formal inquiry is warranted. Please, you can stop at any time. You can decline to answer any question. I understand, Emily said. Please. Okay. Karen clicked the black pen. Tell me about your living situation over the past 5 years, Emily told her. Please, she had practiced this. Not scripted it. Mason had specifically told her not to script it. Please. Because scripted things sound scripted, and the truth is never quite as clean as a script. Please. But she had organized it chronologically, factually. Please. The jobs, the rent, the financial calculations her father ran on a whiteboard in the kitchen every month. Please, itemized down to Emily's share of the paper towels. Please. The application fees that went to Grace's laptop, the university door that closed twice. Please. Karen wrote steadily, asked clarifying questions without inflection. Please. When Emily described the night on the highway, Karen's pen stopped moving for 1 second and then resumed. Please. He drove you himself, Karen said. Yes. And said, he said some time apart would be good for both of us. Karen wrote that down. Read it back. Those were his exact words? Yes, Emily said. Please. I've replayed that sentence a significant number of times. Karen looked up at her. Please. Something in the investigator's face shifted, not unprofessional. He's just human, a flicker. I'm going to show you a document, Karen said. Please. She slid a paper across the table. This was submitted to our office 3 days after the initial report. Please. It's a letter signed by your mother and countersigned by a family attorney. Emily picked it up. Please. She read it. The letter described her as a young woman with a history of emotional instability and distorted perception. Please. It described a family that had tried to support her through mental health challenges that she refused to acknowledge. Please. It described the night on the highway as Emily choosing to leave following a family disagreement. Please. With Robert offering her a ride at her request. It described the last several years as a pattern of Emily creating conflict. He's misinterpreting kindness as control and refusing to accept help. It was written in the language of concern. Every sentence performed worry. It sounded exactly like a mother who loved a difficult child. Emily read it twice. Then she set it down on the table and said, Okay, Carla next to her put one hand flat on the table. Not on Emily, on the table. Just there. Present. Your response? Karen said. My response is that my mother is very good at this, Emily said. Her voice was still level. She did not know how. She has had 24 years of practice at constructing a version of events in which she is the one suffering. I don't have documentation that contradicts what she wrote. I have my own testimony and whatever my sister said in her report. She looked at Karen. What did my sister say? Karen held her gaze. I can tell you that the report included specific incidents. Dates, contexts, direct quotes. Things that a distorted observer would not typically have access to. Because they happened when only family members were present, and the person filing the report was among them. Emily absorbed that. Grace had given them dates, quotes, specific incidents. Grace had done this thoroughly. Can I ask you something? Emily said. Yes. In your experience in cases like this, where there's a counter letter like the one you just showed me, what usually determines the outcome? Karen was quiet for a moment. Corroboration, she said. Independent sources. People outside the family unit who observed the dynamic. Work records, financial records, anything that creates a picture the letter can't fully erase. Emily nodded slowly. I have work records, she said. Both jobs. I can get them. My supervisor at the billing company knew I was living with family because I mentioned it when I explained my situation. I have bank statements showing what I paid. I have some text from my sister asking me to handle things. Covering things. She paused. And I have someone who found me at a rest stop in the desert at 2 a.m. who could tell you what condition I was in. Karen looked at her steadily. Who is that? His name is Mason Callahan, Emily said. She said it simply, without drama. She did not explain the vest or the patch or the reputation. She would let that be what it was going to be. Karen wrote the name. Would he be willing to speak with us? Yes, Emily said. Please. She knew this without having asked, because she knew Mason the way you know the particular weight of something you have been carrying not consciously. But in the body. He'll speak with you. She called him from the parking lot after the interview. They want to talk to you, she said. Tell them yes, he said immediately. You don't know what they're going to ask. Doesn't matter, he said. I know what I saw. A 24-year-old woman sitting alone in the dark with $80 and a name tag and a family that had driven her there. There's not a lot of ways to misinterpret that. Emily leaned against Carla's car. The afternoon was warm and the parking lot smelled like hot asphalt, and she was so tired that her bones felt heavy. But underneath the tired was something else. Something that had been dormant for so long she almost didn't recognize it. Anger, clean, factual, righteous anger. Not the exhausted, turned inward kind she had been carrying for years, the kind that makes you small. This was the other kind, the kind that stands up straight. My mother wrote a letter to the investigator, Emily said. Calling me unstable. Saying, I walked into my father's truck voluntarily, a beat. Yeah, Mason said. The single syllable carried everything. I want to fight it, Emily said. I need to. I know, he said. I'm not unstable. She said. And the words came out harder than she intended, shaking slightly at the edges. I have never been unstable. I have been blamed for things that weren't mine, and I have absorbed it, and I have been quiet because quiet was the only safe option, and I am done being quiet. Emily, Mason said. What? You just described what a stable person does when they finally get to the end of their rope, he said. You're not falling apart, you're waking up. There's a difference. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a second. Then I'm so angry. Good, he said. Don't let it use you. There's a difference there too. Carla came out of the office building and crossed the parking lot and looked at Emily and did not ask how she was. Because Carla had spent enough time in hard rooms to know that sometimes the answer to how are you is not something that fits in a parking lot conversation. She just held out her car keys and said, You want to drive? Sometimes it helps. Emily took the keys. She drove. The bank records took 4 days to pull together. Emily's billing supervisor, a methodical woman named Denise, who had the organizational habits of a person who had survived 17 years in healthcare administration, provided a written statement about Emily's work history and conduct without blinking. You want me to describe what I observed? Denise said on the phone. You were one of the best people I had in that queue, and you worked from what sounded like an extremely difficult home environment without it affecting your output once. Is that what you need? Emily said yes, and Denise said she'd have it written by end of day. The texts were harder. Emily went through her phone slowly, looking for anything that documented what Grace had asked of her, the calls she'd made, the appointments she'd rescheduled, the explanations she'd provided. She found 43 text threads. Many of them were mundane logistics. Household questions, but scattered through them were the ones that mattered. Grace asking her to call the insurance company on her behalf. Grace asking her to talk to their mother about something, so Grace didn't have to. Grace saying, in a text from 2 years ago that Emily had not thought about in months, You're so much better at dealing with Mom than I am. I always feel like such a mess after talking to her. The acknowledgement, casual as breathing, that Emily was the one who managed the family's emotional weather. She photographed each relevant thread and emailed them to Karen Holt with a brief note. Then she sat with her phone in her lap and found a text thread she hadn't opened. One from Grace from 8 days ago. One message sent at 11:47 at night. It said, I filed a report with social services. I should have done it years ago. I know that doesn't fix anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I see it now. Emily had missed it. She'd been too busy to look at her phone that night. Had seen the notifications and assumed it was another call from Sandra and turned the phone over. She read the message 4 times. Then she typed back, I know I just saw this. Thank you. She put the phone down and waited. Please. Grace responded in 11 minutes. Can we talk sometime? Please. Not about mom or dad or the investigation. Just you and me. Please. If you're willing. Emily stared at the message for a long time. Please. She thought about all the things Grace had cost her. Please. All the space Grace had taken up. All the blame Grace had allowed to slide from herself to Emily. Please. All the dinners and scholarships and opportunities and years. Please. She thought about her mother's laugh behind a closed kitchen door on the night everything broke. Please. She also thought about a 21-year-old woman sitting alone with their father in a quiet room and asking, please, do you think she was ever treated fairly? She thought about Mason saying the story might not be finished. Please. Yes, she typed back, give me some time. But yes, she hit send before she could reconsider it. Please. Mason arrived in the city on a Thursday. Please. He came alone, not with the group, just him in the road and a single overnight bag strapped to the back of his bike. Please. He met Karen Holt in the morning, and Emily waited in a coffee shop 2 blocks from the social services office. Please. Unable to sit still, reorganizing the sugar packets on her table by size without realizing she was doing it. Please. He walked in an hour and 40 minutes later, still in his jacket, please, and sat across from her and picked up the menu and looked at it like a man deciding what to order rather than a man who had just spent an hour and 40 minutes being asked questions about a stranger's worst night. Please. How was it? Fine, he said. She's good at her job. Thorough. What did she ask? What I saw. What you said. Please. What condition you were in. The timeline. He set the menu down. She asked me why I stopped. Why I helped. What did you say? He picked the menu back up and looked at it again. Please. I said I stopped because she was there and she was alone. Please. And that, in my experience, people who are sitting alone in the dark at 2 in the morning either chose to be there or were put there. Please. And everything about you said you were put there. The waitress came. Please. Mason ordered coffee and eggs. Emily ordered nothing because her stomach was a closed system today. Please. After the waitress left, she said, my mother's lawyer is pushing back. Please. Karen told me yesterday, claiming the report is retaliatory, that Grace filed it out of anger about the academic misconduct investigation and used me as the vehicle. Mason drank his coffee. Please. What does Grace say? Grace says she can prove she'd been thinking about filing for over a year. Please. She kept notes. Emily shook her head slowly. My 21-year-old sister kept a journal of incidents. Please. Dated. Detailed. For over a year, she looked at the table. Please. She saw it happening to me, and she documented it, and she didn't say anything, and then her voice caught slightly. Please. I'm still angry at her. I want to be clear about that. Please. But she documented it. She was building a case, Mason said. Please. Even if she didn't call it that at the time. Karen said the journal is significant, Emily said. Please. She said documentation from a witness inside the family is the thing that changes these cases. Please. Without it, it's my word against my mother's letter. With it, she stopped. With it, there's a pattern. He's a documented, dated, corroborated pattern. Mason was quiet. He's eating his eggs. He had the particular quality of a person who understood that some information needs to be absorbed without comment. He's. After a moment, he said, what are you feeling right now? Emily thought about it seriously. He's. Like I've been carrying a case I didn't know I was building for 24 years, she said. He's. Like every silence and every okay, and every time I took the blame, I was just adding to it. He's. And now someone opened the filing cabinet and there it all is. He's. And it's a lot. Yeah, he said. I don't know if I feel better or worse. You feel real, he said. He's. That's what that is. When you've been told a false version of yourself for long enough, and then someone shows you the true one, it doesn't feel like relief right away. It feels like grief, because you have to mourn the years you spent in the wrong version. Emily looked at him. You've done this before, she said. Not found people at rest stops. This helping someone work through it. You've done this a lot. He shrugged. Some people take to things, he said. I took to this. Why? He was quiet long enough that she thought he was going to deflect. Then he said, my daughter, the one who left. Before she left, she told me something. She said, the problem, Dad, is that you were always fixing things for everyone else while your own house was on fire. And she was right. I spent years out there. He gestured vaguely, meaning the road. Meaning all of it, being the one who shows up for strangers. He's, and I missed everything at home. He picked up his coffee. So now I try to do both. I try to not miss the strangers and not miss the people close to me either. A pause. I'm still working on the second part. Your daughter? Emily said. Have you tried again recently? Last month, he said. Left a message. She hasn't responded. She might, Emily said. She might not, he said. Either way, I'm going to keep leaving them. Because giving up on someone just because they don't respond that's not something I'm willing to do. Emily sat with that. The coffee shop was warm and noisy around them, ordinary and good. And she thought about the distance between where she had been 7 weeks ago, curled against a concrete wall with $83 and a broken phone, and where she was sitting now. Same different floor, different ceiling, more room. She thought about Sandra's letter, about being called unstable, distorted, difficult. She thought about Karen Holt's yellow legal pad, and Grace's journal, and Denise's written statement, and Mason sitting across from an investigator for an hour and 40 minutes on her behalf. Can I say something? Emily said. Always, Mason said. I think my mother believes what she wrote, Emily said slowly. In that letter. I think she has told herself that version for so long that it's real to her. I think she genuinely does not understand what she did. Mason waited. And I don't know what to do with that, Emily said. Because it would be easier if she were calculating about it. If she knew she was lying. But I think she just constructed a reality that protected herself and put me outside of it. And the construction is so complete that she can't see it anymore. That happens, Mason said. More often than people think. Does it change anything? Emily asked. Legally? Personally? He shook his head. No, the pattern is the pattern regardless of intent. Personally, he turned his mug. Only you can answer that. She nodded. Her phone buzzed. Karen Holt's name on the screen. She picked up. I wanted to update you before end of day, Karen said. Based on the documentation submitted, the financial records. The employment statement, the text records, and the testimony provided this morning, we're opening a formal inquiry. That means your mother will be formally notified and will have the opportunity to respond through proper channels. It also means the letter her attorney submitted will be reviewed against the documented evidence rather than taken at face value. Emily's hand tightened on the phone. What does that mean for me, she said. It means you're being believed, Karen said. And the word landed with a weight that Emily hadn't expected. A physical sensation in the sternum, something cracking open. It means the official record is no longer only your mother's version. Emily said thank you and hung up and sat very still. Mason was watching her. They're opening a formal inquiry, she said. He nodded. They believe me, she said. I know, he said. She pressed both palms flat on the table, breathed through her nose. The coffee shop noise continued around her, cups and voices, and someone's child laughing 2 tables over ordinary life, proceeding at its ordinary volume. Indifferent and beautiful. I've been waiting to be believed, she said. Very quietly for so long that I stopped knowing I was waiting. Mason said nothing. He understood that some sentences don't need a response. They just need a witness. She sat in that coffee shop for another hour. They talked about small things, eventually the road he'd taken into the city. A gas station outside of Casa Grande that made surprisingly good breakfast burritos. The nurses in Emily's shared house who had started leaving her notes about good places to eat in the neighborhood. Ordinary things. The kind that mean everything when you've been living in extraordinary pain long enough. When they finally stood to leave, Emily said, Mason. He looked at her. Thank you, she said. Not for this specifically. For the water bottle. For the 6 words. For everything that came from that. He picked up his jacket. Don't thank me, he said. Do something with it. I am, she said. I will. He walked out. She stood in the coffee shop doorway and watched him go. A gray-bearded man in a leather vest walking to his bike in a city parking lot. And thought that there was no way to explain to anyone who hadn't been there in the dark, at the rest stop, at the end of everything, what it meant that he had stopped. That he had been the one person who looked at her and did not see a problem. He's, he had seen a person, that was everything. But Sandra Dawson had one more move left. He's, and Emily was about to find out that the woman who had spent 24 years controlling the narrative of their family was not going to let an official inquiry rewrite it without a fight. She had called Grace. She had said things to Grace that Grace would repeat to Emily that evening in a phone call made with shaking hands. He's, and those things, the specific calculated things, Sandra said to her younger daughter in a moment of desperation, were going to force Emily to do the one thing she had never done in her life. Stand in a room with her mother and say everything. Every word, all of it, out loud. Grace called at 7:43 in the evening. Emily knew immediately from the quality of the silence on the first half second of the call, that specific held breath texture, that something had happened. She had learned, growing up in the Dawson house, to read the emotional weather from tiny signals. A silence, a pause before someone spoke. The speed at which a door closed. She had developed it as survival, this hyper-reading of atmosphere. And it had cost her enormously, over the years, the constant vigilance of it. But right now it told her, before Grace said a single word, that her sister was frightened. She called me, Grace said. Emily sat down on her bed. Mom, an hour ago. She was. Grace's voice was doing something complicated, cycling through registers. She told me that if I didn't retract my report, she was going to tell the Academic Misconduct Board that I had a history of dishonesty that predated university. She said she had documentation, letters from teachers. Something from middle school. Grace stopped. I don't know if she actually has anything. But she said it the way she says things when she means them. Emily pressed her free hand against her knee. Are you okay? Emily asked. I'm scared, Grace said. And the word came out, stripped of everything, just the fact of it. And Emily heard in it the voice of her sister at 7 years old. At 10, at 14. The voice Grace used when the house got too loud and she would come to Emily's room and sit on the end of the bed without asking. Emily had always let her. She had never once told Grace to leave. Listen to me, Emily said. What she's describing, that's coercion. You're being threatened for filing a legitimate report. That is a separate legal issue from everything else. And you need to tell Karen Holt about this call immediately. Tonight. Don't wait. She's my mother, Grace said. I know, Emily softly. Not harshly, just acknowledging it. The specific crushing difficulty of that fact. I know she's your mother, Emily said. She's mine too, and I know that what you're feeling right now is. She stopped. Grace. She drove me to a highway in the desert and left me there. She wrote an official letter to a government investigator calling me mentally unstable. And now she's threatening you for telling the truth about it. Emily's voice was steady and hard and clean. She is not acting like your mother right now. She is acting like someone who is panicking because the story she built is collapsing. And the only way to protect yourself, the only way, is to not let her rebuild it on your back. Silence from Grace. Long enough that Emily thought the call might have dropped. Then Grace said, I should have done something years ago. Yes, Emily said. But you're doing it now. That's not enough. It's not nothing, Emily said. Call Karen tonight. Tell her exactly what Mom said. As close to word for word as you can remember. Do you still have the call in your recent history? Yes. Save it. Don't delete anything. Send Karen the timestamp. Emily was moving as she talked. Finding a piece of paper, writing things down. And Grace, whatever Mom said she has from your school records, she cannot legally use that as leverage. That's not how any of this works. She's bluffing or she's overreaching, and either way, a lawyer can handle it. I don't have a lawyer, Grace said. Karen's office can point you to one. Call her first. A pause. Yes, Grace said. Then, very quietly, Emily, I'm sorry. I know it doesn't cover it. I know sorry isn't a down payment on 20 years. But I need to say it anyway. Emily sat still. She thought about every time she had absorbed something that should have been shared. Every time she had stood between Grace and their parents' anger like a break wall. She thought about the text from 2 years ago. You're so much better at dealing with Mom than I am casual. Thoughtless, Grace not even understanding what she was describing. Ease, what she was asking Emily to carry. She thought about Grace. Ease. Alone at 21, writing dated entries in a journal about things she had watched happen to her sister. Ease. Building a case she didn't even know was a case. Sitting across from their father and asking, Ease, do you think she was ever treated fairly? I know it doesn't cover it, Emily said. And I'm still angry. I want you to know that I'm not going to pretend the anger isn't there because this is a serious moment. Ease. It's there. Okay, Grace said. But I also know that you're 21 and you grew up in the same house I did. And they chose me to be the problem so that you could be the solution. Ease. And that wasn't your design. You inherited it. Emily breathed. Ease. I'm not going to make you pay for something they built. Grace made a sound that wasn't quite crying and wasn't quite not. Please call Karen, Emily said. Tonight. And then call me back. She hung up and immediately called Mason. Please, he answered in one ring. Sandra threatened Grace, Emily said. Please, to get her to retract the report. Academic records. Please, some threat about school documentation. I told Grace to call the investigator. Good, Mason said. Please, I need to talk to my mother, Emily said. In person. Not for the investigation. Not for the record. For me. Please, I need to say it to her face. She stopped. I know what you're going to say. You don't, he said. Please, you're going to say be careful. Or wait. Or let the process. I was going to say I'll drive you, he said. Please. Emily stopped. You don't have to do that, she said. Please. I know, he said. When do you need to go, she thought. Please. Sandra would still be in Maricopa. The drive was 2 hours. Please. If she left in the morning, she could be there before noon. Tomorrow, Emily said. 9 o'clock. I'll be there at 8:30, he said. Please. She lay awake until 2 in the morning organizing everything she needed to say. Please. Not scripting. Organizing. There was a difference. Please. A script was a performance. What she was building was a structure, a way to walk into a room that had always defeated her and not lose herself in the first 30 seconds. Please. She had been defeated in that room her entire life. Please. Not tomorrow. Grace had called Karen that night and reported the phone call. Please. Karen had documented it, flagged it as potential witness intimidation. Please. And forwarded it to the county attorney's office. By 9 in the morning, Sandra's lawyer had received a formal notice that any contact with Grace regarding the investigation constituted potential obstruction. Karen called Emily to update her before she left the house. The case is stronger today than it was yesterday, Karen said. I want you to know that. Thank you, Emily said. I'm going to see my mother today. Not for the investigation, this is personal. I need you to know it's not on behalf of anything official. A pause from Karen. Are you bringing anyone with you? Yes, Emily said. Okay, Karen said. Take care of yourself. Mason was at her door at 8:27. He drank coffee from a travel mug and said nothing about the dark circles under her eyes or the fact that she had clearly been awake most of the night. He just handed her the second coffee he'd brought from the place on her corner, which he had apparently located and already visited, and said, ready? No, she said. Good, he said. Let's go. The drive to Maricopa took an hour and 50 minutes. They talked for the first 40, and then let the road be quiet for the rest, which was its own kind of preparation. Emily watched the landscape shift, the flat spread of it, the enormity of the sky, and thought about the last time she'd been on this road, sitting in her father's truck with the country radio too loud. How different the same geography could feel, depending on the direction you were moving. She had her father's number in her phone. She had texted him the night before. I'm coming tomorrow. I need to talk to Mom. You should be there. He had responded within minutes. I'll be here. Not I'll keep her calm, or I'll make sure she listens, or any of the diplomatic intermediary language he usually used. Just I'll be here. She had read it 3 times trying to find the subtext. Eventually she concluded it meant exactly what it said. Mason parked down the block from her parents' house. He turned off the engine and sat. I'm not coming in, he said. This is yours. I know, she said. I'll be right here. She looked at the house from down the block. Same white paint, same brown trim, same front window, with the blinds at the same angle they had always been. The most familiar building in her life, and the one she had least wanted to see again. If I come out in 10 minutes looking like I got hit by a truck, she said. Please, don't say anything, just drive. Done, he said. Please. She got out of the bike. She walked down the block. Please. She rang the doorbell of the house she had grown up in and waited. Please. Robert opened the door. He looked older. Not dramatically, it had only been weeks, but the way people age in compressed time when something is weighing on them. His eyes were tired, and he was standing slightly differently. Less of that particular squared-off quality he usually carried. The stance of a man who was accustomed to being the final word in a room. Emily, he said. Dad, she said. Is she here? She's in the kitchen, he said. She knows you're coming. Okay, she said, and walked in. Sandra was standing at the counter. She had clearly made choices about how to be standing when Emily walked in, hands around a mug. Posture composed, face arranged into something that was trying to be open and only managed to look braced. She was wearing the blue sweater she wore when she wanted to seem approachable. Emily noticed that and filed it and kept walking until she was in the kitchen doorway. Sandra said, Warm. Careful, Mom, Emily said. I'm not here for a conversation. I'm here to say things. And I need you to not interrupt me until I'm finished. Can you do that? Sandra's mouth tightened slightly. Of course that's not an answer, Emily said. Can you do that? Yes or no? Robert behind her. Said quietly, Sandra, let her talk. Sandra looked at her husband. Something passed between them. Then she looked back at Emily and said, Yes. Emily breathed in through her nose. I am not unstable, she said. I have never been unstable. I have been a person who absorbed enormous amounts of emotional labor and financial burden and blame in this house for my entire life. And I did it quietly, and you took my quietness for evidence that everything was fine. It was not fine, Sandra opened her mouth. I'm not done, Emily said. Sandra closed it. I paid rent in my childhood home. I had my university money redirected to Grace twice without being asked. I took jobs at 22 and 23 to pay what you calculated as my share of this household while you called it helping out. I covered for Grace so many times that she didn't even register it as covering. She thought I was just efficient. Good at managing people. She didn't understand she was watching someone drown slowly. Emily's voice was not shaking. She was astonished by this. I took the blame for things I didn't do because the alternative was an argument that was going to be relitigated for 3 weeks and end with the same conclusion anyway. I made myself smaller every year because smaller was the only safe size in this house. Robert made a sound. Not a word, just a sound, like something shifting. The night Dad drove me to the highway, Emily said. I waited for the truck to turn around. I waited until the lights were gone. I sat on a bench in a rest stop for 5 hours because I could not locate a single person I trusted enough to call. That is not a coincidence. That is a result. That is what 24 years of being told you are the problem produces: a person who believes it so completely she can't find a handhold. She looked directly at her mother. I know you believe the version you wrote in that letter, Emily said. I've thought about this a lot, and I think you actually believe it. I think you have been telling yourself this story for so long that you cannot see it as a story. You think it's just the truth, that I was difficult, that I distorted things, that you tried your best with a hard situation. She stopped. You didn't. You chose the easier child, and you built the harder one into a utility. And then when the utility walked out the door, you called it instability. The kitchen was absolutely silent. Sandra's face was doing something complicated and painful. Emily watched it and did not look away and did not soften. I am not coming back to this family, Emily said. Not on the terms that existed before. Those terms are gone. If there is ever going to be a relationship between us, it has to be built on something different, on the actual truth. On you being able to say what was done, not what you told yourself you were doing. She paused. I don't know if you can do that. I genuinely don't know. But that's what it would take. Sandra's voice, when it came, was low and stripped of all its usual architecture. I thought I was helping Grace, she said. She needed more. She was more fragile. I thought you were strong enough to handle things. I was strong enough because I had no other option, Emily said. That is not a gift you gave me. That is a cost you charged me. Sandra flinched. Robert said. From the doorway. She's right, Sandra. Both women turned and looked at him. He was standing with his arms at his sides, and his face open in a way Emily had never seen it not defended. Not managed, just open. Tired and open. She is right, he said again. And each word landed separately. Like stones, I have been telling myself I was just stepping back. Letting you handle the family. Keeping the peace. But keeping the peace meant letting Emily carry things she shouldn't have had to carry. I knew it. I told myself it was fine. He looked at Emily. It wasn't fine. And I drove you to that highway and I didn't look back and his voice fractured slightly. He held it. I'm sorry. That's a real apology. Not a phone call at 4 a.m. I'm sorry. Emily looked at her father. She had prepared for Sandra. She had organized everything around Sandra. Her father's voice, cracking on a real apology, was the one thing she had not prepared for. And she felt it move through her differently than she expected, not melting anything. Not dissolving the structure she'd built, but acknowledging something. A crack of light under a door. I hear you, she said to him. That was all. But she meant it. She turned back to Sandra. Her mother's eyes were wet. Not crying, Sandra did not cry easily. Which was its own kind of information, but wet. The way eyes get when the body understands something the mind is still refusing. I don't know how to say what you need me to say, Sandra said. I don't know if I have I don't know if I can do that. Her voice was small in a way Emily had never heard it. Then that's your answer, Emily said. Not cruel, just clear. That's the information I needed. I wasn't sure until now. And now I am. Emily, I'm not angry anymore, Emily said. And this surprised her as she said it, the truth of it. The fact that it was true, that what had replaced the anger was something cooler and more finished. Like the last hour of a long night. I am genuinely not angry. I needed to be. But right now I'm just done. With the version of this family that needed me to be the problem. I'm done being in that story. Sandra said nothing. Emily looked at her mother for a long moment. She looked at the blue sweater. The composed hands around the mug. The wet eyes that would not quite spill. I hope you get there, Emily said. I mean that. For your sake as much as anyone's. Because living in a story where everything was someone else's fault I know what that costs the person it's charged to. I don't know what it costs the person who charges it. But I imagine it's not nothing. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. Past Robert, who reached out and touched her shoulder briefly, just 1 second. His hand on her shoulder and then let go. She walked through the living room and out the front door and down the front path and down the block. Mason saw her coming. He read her the way she walked. The way she was holding her arms, the set of her jaw, and he did not start the engine yet. He waited until she reached the bike and stood next to it. How'd it go? He asked. I said everything, she said. Everything. Every word, she said. All of it. Out loud, he looked at her. And my dad apologized. A real one. She paused. My mother said she didn't know if she could do what I was asking. Which means she can't. But now I know. Mason nodded slowly. How do you feel? Emily thought about it. She thought about the kitchen and the blue sweater and her father's voice fracturing and the specific, conclusive quiet that had settled in her chest on the walk out. Like I put something down, she said. Something I've been carrying so long I forgot I was carrying it. She looked at him. You know when your arms are numb because you've been holding something for so long, and then you put it down and the blood comes back? And it hurts. That coming back hurts, but it's the right kind of hurt because something is working again that wasn't. Yeah, he said. I know that. It's that, she said. He started the engine. The formal inquiry concluded 6 weeks later. Karen Holt called Emily on a Tuesday morning while she was at her desk processing claims and said the findings had been finalized. The board had determined a documented pattern of psychological coercion and financial exploitation within the family unit over a period exceeding 5 years. No criminal charges. The board's findings didn't operate that way, but the documentation was now part of an official record. Sandra's lawyer's counter letter had been formally noted and formally set aside. Grace's report had been upheld and validated. You were believed, Karen said again. And Emily thought that she would never get entirely used to those three words. That they would always do that thing to her sternum. That opening. Thank you, Emily said. You did the work, Karen said. I just wrote it down. Emily sat at her desk for a moment after the call ended and let it land. Let the finality of it settle through her. Then she picked up her phone and called Mason. It's over, she said when he answered. Officially. A beat of silence from him. Then how's it feel? Like I expected it to feel bigger, she said. But also like right. Exactly right. Like the last word of a very long sentence. That's exactly what it is, he said. She heard road noise in the background. He was already moving. Somewhere on some highway, doing the thing he did. Where are you? Asked. New Mexico, she said. There's a situation outside of Albuquerque. Another rest stop, she said. Parking lot this time, he said. Upgrade. She laughed. The real kind. The kind that came from somewhere unguarded. Mason, she said. Yeah. Has your daughter called back? A pause. Longer than usual. 2 days ago, he said. She called. Emily's breath caught. And we talked for 40 minutes, he said. His voice was doing something careful and enormous at the same time. She's not, it's not fixed. We're not, it's the beginning of something. If we both do the work. But she called. She called, Emily said. She called, he said. She sat with that for a moment. The idea of Mason on a highway somewhere with his phone. Hearing a voice he'd been leaving messages for. The idea of a chain Ruth. Carla, Emily, and now maybe Mason's daughter people, passing something forward that they'd been given when they needed it most. I've been thinking, Emily said, about what Ruth said. About the chain. Yeah? I want to do something, Emily said. I've been thinking about it since Ridgeway, and I think I know what it looks like now. There's a community organization here. They work with young adults who age out of foster care. No support systems, no family structures. They asked me to come in as a volunteer resource. Someone who's been through the financial piece, the housing piece. She stopped. I said, yes. Good, Mason said. I start next month. She said, I don't know what I'm doing yet. But I know what it feels like to need someone to hand you a water bottle and say a true thing. I can do that much. That's more than most, he said. She looked out the window of the office. Ordinary city. Ordinary morning. People moving through their ordinary lives. Each one carrying something invisible. Most of them carrying it alone. What's the kid in the Albuquerque parking lot like? She asked. He's young, Mason said. 20 maybe. Sitting next to a car with a flat and no jack and an empty wallet, and trying very hard to look like this is a manageable situation. Is he going to be okay? I'm about to go find out, Mason said. I'll let you know. She smiled. Go, she said. Go be a person who notices. Talk soon, he said. And then he was gone. Back into the road noise. Back into the particular vocation he had made of his life. And Emily sat at her desk in the city she had chosen and thought about the chain. About Ruth keeping her door unlocked. About Carla driving 2 hours without being asked twice. About Grace sitting alone with their father and asking the question that changed everything. About Robert's hand on her shoulder for exactly 1 second at the door. About Karen's yellow notepad and the red pen and those 3 words you were believed. About a water bottle extended across 10 feet of dark concrete by a man who had no reason to extend it. She thought about what her life would have looked like if Mason had not stopped. If he had seen her in that rest stop and calculated that it was not his problem and ridden on. The version of her that would have existed on the other side of that night smaller. More finished, more convinced. She thought about how close it had been. How absurdly, terrifyingly close. And then she thought about the 20-year-old in an Albuquerque parking lot right now. Looking up and seeing a gray-bearded man in a leather vest walking toward him. And the particular calculation that young man was running, is this safe? Is this real? Is this something? Or is this nothing? And the moment when Mason would hand him something practical and step back and give him room. Ease. She hoped the kid took the water bottle. She hoped it mattered. Ease, she knew it would. 3 months later, ease. Emily Dawson stood in front of 11 young adults in a community center conference room and introduced herself. Ease, not as someone who had it figured out, not as a success story. Ease, because she was too honest and too tired of narratives that wrap up clean to call herself that. She introduced herself as someone who had been where they were without a floor. Ease, without a frame, without a single person she trusted enough to call, and who was standing in this room because a stranger had handed her a water bottle and said something true. Ease. She told them what he said. 6 words. You were never the problem. She watched it land on 11 different faces in 11 different ways, some of them going still. Ease. Some of them looking down. One young woman in the back, whose jaw tightened and whose eyes went bright, and who looked away fast in the particular manner of someone who has just heard something true about themselves for the first time. Ease. Emily had been that person. She was not that person anymore. Ease. She was the person on the other side of the sentence. Ease. Saying it out loud, meaning it completely, and understanding that the meaning of it was not charity and was not pity and was not rescue. Ease. It was just the truth, plainly said, given to someone who needed it the same way the body needs water. Ease, without transaction, without condition, without a price. Ease. This was what she had. This was what she was. A person who had been left on a highway and had gotten back up and had built something real out of the rubble of everything she'd been told she was. Ease. Not because she was extraordinary, because someone had stopped. Ease. Because one person, for no reason except that she was there and she was human and that was enough. Ease had looked at her in the dark and chosen to see someone worth seeing. Ease. And that changed everything. That will always change everything. Ease. That is the only thing, in the end, that ever does.